A brave little girl's wish. A royal guard's moment that defied tradition. At Buckingham Palace, under the golden morning sun, Sergeant James Harrison stood tall, unwavering in his duties. With 15 years of service under his belt, including 2 tough tours in Afghanistan, Harrison had mastered the art of stillness. His uniform, bright red and polished, gleamed in the light, but it wasn't just his appearance that commanded attention. It was the discipline in his posture, the calmness in his demeanor, and the way his eyes, though fixed ahead, never missed a beat. No whisper, no shifting footstep, no sudden movement escaped him. He was a living embodiment of centuries-old tradition. He wasn't just a guard, he was a sentinel, a symbol of duty and dedication. On that particular morning, however, something felt different. Harrison's sharp eyes caught sight of a small family making their way through the sea of tourists. The father and mother moved carefully, protective yet gentle, their eyes constantly on their daughter. Emily, who couldn't have been more than 7, was frail, her small frame seeming to carry the weight of the world. But it wasn't just her physical condition that caught Harrison's attention, it was the bright, determined look in her eyes. Despite her bald head, a result of her cancer treatments, Emily's spirit was unbroken. Her joy radiated, even as she struggled with every step. She pointed at Harrison, her face lighting up with admiration for the soldier in front of her. As she neared Harrison's post, the crowd naturally parted to give them space. Emily's father whispered to her softly, his voice catching in his throat. "Remember what we talked about, sweetheart. The guards have an important job." Emily nodded, her small voice carrying over the crowd. "They protect the Queen and the palace." And hundreds of years of tradition, she recited like she'd practiced it. To her, this moment was more than just a visit, it was a dream. A wish to meet a royal guard, someone who represented strength, honor, and bravery. Harrison watched her, his heart heavy. He had seen all kinds of tourists, but Emily's quiet courage, her determination to push through despite her illness, touched something deep inside him. For the first time in 15 years, Harrison felt the weight of tradition and protocol tug at him, but something else, something more human, called louder. As Emily and her family drew closer to Harrison's post, the crowd around them seemed to instinctively understand the gravity of the moment. Tourists, once chatting and laughing, now fell silent, their eyes drawn to the small girl whose condition was apparent yet overshadowed by the brightness in her gaze. Emily's excitement was contagious, and for a fleeting moment, the usual bustle of Buckingham Palace faded into the background. Harrison remained still, as always, his gaze steady and forward, but his attention was entirely on the little girl. He could hear her soft voice as she spoke in awe, remarking on the medals on his uniform. The innocence in her words struck a chord deep within him. She wasn't just a little girl seeing a soldier. She was a warrior of her own battle, fighting a sickness that no one should have to endure. Her mother, gently adjusting Emily's beanie, whispered to an elderly couple, explaining the severity of Emily's condition. The words, though quiet, rang loud in Harrison's ears. "The doctors gave us 3 months," Emily's father had said, his voice strained with the heavy weight of truth. "But she's still fighting so hard." All she wanted was to see the royal guard. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, and even the hardened tourists seemed to soften in their gaze. Harrison's military training, the one that had kept him impervious to all distractions, started to crack under the weight of the moment. Here was a girl, so small, yet so strong, facing a battle no one should ever have to fight. Emily, despite her fragility, moved closer to him, her steps small but determined. With each movement, Harrison could see how hard she fought to keep going, and it reminded him of the soldiers he had served alongside in Afghanistan, those who fought not for glory, but for the ones they loved. The closer Emily got, the more the crowd seemed to hold its collective breath, as if waiting for the moment to unfold. And then, in a quiet, deliberate motion, Harrison did something he hadn't done in 15 years of service. He moved. He turned, his boots clicking on the pavement with military precision. The crowd gasped. It was a moment of complete stillness and yet profound action. He wasn't just a guard anymore. In that instant, he was a man who understood what it meant to stand, not just for tradition, but for something greater than himself. Harrison knelt, bringing himself to eye level with Emily, and for the first time in his career, he spoke to her. "Hello, Emily," he said gently, his voice carrying the weight of a soldier who had seen the worst and still chose to be kind. The crowd held its breath, the energy palpable as Harrison's actions broke the boundaries of his role, and for that brief, beautiful moment, the guard became a protector, honoring a little girl who had shown him what true bravery looked like. As Emily stood before Guard Harrison, her small body trembling slightly with the effort to remain still, her eyes sparkled with excitement and awe. The crowd around them had gone completely quiet, as if they, too, could feel the weight of the moment. Emily's voice, soft yet filled with the enthusiasm only a child can muster, broke the silence. "Daddy, look at how straight he stands. Just like when Nurse Jenny tells me to sit up straight during my medicine time." Her innocent comparison between his unyielding discipline and her own daily battles cut through the air, resonating with everyone nearby. The crowd had gathered not to simply witness a ceremonial guard, but to witness something far more meaningful, humanity at its most raw and beautiful. Harrison, though trained to be impervious to everything around him, felt a stirring in his chest. It was as though her bravery, her infectious spirit, had broken through the rigid shell that had protected him for so long. He had guarded Buckingham Palace through countless distractions, tourists snapping photos, children yelling, people trying to provoke reactions, but this little girl, so fragile yet so brave, moved him in a way he couldn't explain. He had spent 15 years on guard, dedicated to tradition, honor, and protocol, but now, standing there before Emily, everything felt different. The weight of the rules, of his duty, seemed to shift. As Emily edged closer to him, every movement was small but determined. Her parents had taught her well. She remained just far enough to respect his position, but Harrison could see the longing in her eyes. She wanted this moment with a soldier who, in her eyes, wasn't just standing still, but performing an act of courage every second of his life. Her innocent enthusiasm was contagious, and for the first time in years, Harrison felt something stir within him, a desire to break the boundaries of his training, to honor not just the queen or tradition, but this little warrior standing before him. The crowd seemed to hold its breath as Emily spoke again, this time with an almost pleading tone. "Mommy, Daddy, may I please take a picture with him?" Her request was soft, polite, but filled with the purity of a child who could not fathom the complexity of the world, only the sincerity of her wish. Harrison stood there, his mind racing. His training told him to stay still, to not deviate from his role, but his heart was telling him something different. He saw the determination in her eyes, the quiet courage that belied her illness, and he knew then that breaking protocol for this moment, for Emily, was the right thing to do. And so, with one deliberate, precise motion, Harrison turned to face her, dropping to one knee to meet her at eye level. The crowd gasped collectively, stunned by the break in his usual composure. This wasn't just a royal guard responding to a request. This was a man acknowledging the bravery of a little girl, whose spirit had touched something deep inside him. The moment was electric, filled with a rare energy that everyone in the plaza could feel. "Hello, Emily," Harrison said gently, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority he had earned over years of service. It was a moment of humanity breaking through the steel of tradition. For Emily, it was a dream come true. For Harrison, it was a reminder that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in following rules, but in listening to the call of compassion. The crowd stood in stunned silence, and then, as if on cue, Emily's father took out his camera to capture the moment. The applause that followed was thunderous, but it was nothing compared to the overwhelming warmth and pride in Emily's smile. Harrison's heart, too, was full, not from the protocol he had followed for so long, but from the unspoken bond between them, a bond of respect, courage, and shared humanity. The applause slowly subsided as the weight of the moment sank in. The crowd remained in a hushed awe, their eyes on guard Harrison, still kneeling before Emily, a perfect symbol of discipline and compassion. Emily, her small hand now trembling in excitement, touched the medal Harrison had pinned to her dress. The light from the sun made it gleam brightly, but her eyes were the true source of radiance, as if the medal wasn't just a token but a representation of something far deeper, her own strength, and Harrison's silent acknowledgement of it. Her parents stood behind her, struggling to hold back their tears. They had hoped for so little yet received so much more, an unforgettable moment that would carry them through the hardest of times. Harrison felt it too, the magnitude of this simple yet profound act. He had spent years standing still, following orders without question, but today, for the first time, he realized that his duty was not just to uphold tradition, but to protect the moments that truly mattered, like the one unfolding before him now. The crowd began to shift, moving slowly, some still wiping tears from their eyes, others too moved to speak. But Harrison didn't rise from his kneeling position just yet. He could feel the weight of the world around him, the love and gratitude pouring from Emily's family, but also from the strangers in the crowd, who had been witness to something far more meaningful than any royal ceremony. Emily, her small frame tired from the effort, stood as tall as she could, her back straight, the same as Harrison's. In that moment, they weren't two strangers in a crowd, they were both warriors, bound by the strength to fight in their own ways. "You're one of us now," Harrison whispered, his voice steady, yet thick with emotion. Emily nodded, her smile never wavering. The enormity of his words settled in the space between them. In a world that too often overlooked the strength of the sick and the frail, this moment, a simple act of respect, had given Emily more than just a medal. It had given her dignity, a reaffirmation of her fight, and a symbol of honor. Harrison rose to his feet, his movements as precise as they had always been. But this time, there was a new weight in his steps. His posture was the same, his boots clicking on the ground with military perfection, but inside him, something had changed. The guard who had always stood in silent resolve had now taken part in something that transcended duty. He had broken protocol, not because he was forced to, but because he understood that some moments were too important to follow rules. As he resumed his post, the crowd started to disperse, but no one would forget the scene they had witnessed. For Emily, her bravery would forever be immortalized in a way no hospital room could contain. And for Harrison, his silent service had become something more, a reminder that sometimes, Breaking tradition is the true path to honoring it. As the crowd continued to disperse, the weight of what had just happened lingered in the air, like a quiet echo that wouldn't fade. Emily, her small hand resting on the shiny medal Harrison had given her, seemed to glow with a renewed sense of purpose. The exhaustion from her battle with illness was still visible on her face, but her spirit, her unwavering courage, shone brighter than ever before. She had done something few could even fathom, and in that moment, she felt as though she had earned more than just a medal. She had earned the respect of an entire crowd, and in some ways, she had even earned her own place in history. Harrison, standing tall once more, his boots clicking sharply against the cobblestones, was a changed man. His rigid posture, as perfect as it had always been, now carried the weight of something more profound. He had always known what it meant to serve, to protect, and to uphold tradition. But today, he had learned that real strength didn't just lie in following orders. It was found in knowing when to break them, when the right thing to do went beyond protocol. And in that moment, when Emily stood in front of him, her frail body brimming with determination, Harrison realized that his duty was not only to protect the palace, but to protect the human moments that made the world more meaningful. The crowd had witnessed something extraordinary, a small act of kindness that transcended the ordinary. Tourists, who moments before had been snapping pictures of the guards as if they were nothing more than part of a performance, were now whispering among themselves. Some were still wiping tears from their eyes, their phones forgotten in their hands. Others had stopped filming, realizing that the moment they had just witnessed was worth far more than any viral video. It was a reminder that the Royal Guard wasn't just a symbol of tradition and duty, but a living testament to something far greater: humanity. For Emily, the moment had come to an end, but it would live on in her heart, and in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed her courage. As she and her parents turned to leave, she looked back at Harrison one last time, her small figure fading into the crowd, but her spirit, unshaken by her illness, stayed with the crowd. The tourists, parents with children, even the elderly couple, all of them left with a sense of pride, respect, and a renewed understanding of what true strength looks like. As for Harrison, he stood tall and silent, his gaze fixed forward. His job wasn't done, but he knew this moment, this one act of kindness, of humanity, had meant more than any order he had ever followed. The guard's silence, his unshakable resolve, now carried with it the weight of a lesson learned. Strength isn't about remaining immovable. It's about knowing when to act, when to protect, and when to show compassion. That's the real duty of a Royal Guard. We'd love to hear what you think. What would you have done in Guard Harrison's position? Is there a time when you think breaking protocol for the sake of compassion is the right thing to do? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single comment and appreciate hearing your perspective. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories like this one. Let's keep the conversation going.